Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down to talk about CD Projekt Red. Normally we're talking about Cyberpunk here on this channel because I've noticed many of you are like me. We respect The Witcher, we even like The Witcher a lot, but we're more partial to Cyberpunk if we're honest. And I think that's just because of the Fallout building blocks of this channel. We're just sci-fi geeks. Star Wars has done well here, so it only makes sense that Cyberpunk would do better than any of my Witcher content ever did. But I still want to give CD Projekt Red their roses because I think what they're doing here with their next-gen update is above and beyond in a couple of ways. I don't want to shower them with praise ahead of the launch. We all know how that goes, but I do think what they're doing here is really nice when we're seeing games sometimes charge for updates, and what they're doing here is not only updating the things you'd expect across the visuals and performance, but they're adding new content, fixes from the modding community, a lot of cool stuff here, and they're teasing even more surprises that aren't a big deal. They're making sure to emphasize that, but they're ensuring that there is more to come. And I think that's very fun because I talk a lot about some of my favorite games on this channel because, you know, of course I do. There's a lot of games I'm very passionate about, and I love to see companies celebrate the games that mean a lot to them and make them these types of events and don't feel like they're really wringing us dry here. The Witcher 3 was a sign to many of us that you could do right by the customer and provide this big AAA RPG and then weeks of free DLC and really ambitious expansions. So enough patting them on the back. Let's get into the next gen update. I'm just particularly hyped about what I've seen so far with it. If you're new here, you're into CD Projekt Red coverage, whether it be The Witcher or mostly Cyberpunk, consider subscribing. With that, let's get into this Witcher 3 next gen update. For starters, it is, as I said, free. It's coming December 14th, and they really made sure throughout this 30-minute presentation, just talking about what's coming to the game, that they emphasized, hey, like, we don't want to oversell this. Like, there was this one guy who said, at least I could count on two hands the amount of times they went, we don't want to oversell this. We're not trying to oversell this. We don't want to emphasize that. They're trying to make it a thing, like, be excited, but don't get super hyped. I mean, it is a free update after all, but they push the limits in some ways on what they could add to this free update as there's new quests, new armor, new things to discover in the world, and I'm really excited to get into some of that. So I just want to make sure it was clear up front when it's coming out, how much, or really, it will not cost you anything. But continuing on, the first thing they get into is ray tracing. Oh God, I'm getting flashbacks to my Starfield video. Oh God, I don't want to talk about ray tracing. It looks great, okay? For those who don't have any context, I completely embarrassed myself trying to talk about ray tracing in a video a couple of weeks ago. I made my apology. I was like, yo, my bad. I was completely off the mark. I'm going to go learn some more about that. But I love that they're including this here, especially because it's tied to quality mode. They got into things like ambient occlusion, but more than anything, the game looks beautiful in a lot of the shots that they showed here. And continuing on past the visuals, they got into the new Ultra Plus settings, is what they're calling it, over on PC. They said this isn't necessarily a brand new preset, but this is something that you can tweak within the options of the game itself. Now, over on the console side of things, there's going to be a performance and quality mode, as you'd expect, with a next-gen update for a previous-gen game. The Xbox Series X and PS5 are going to include ray tracing in quality mode, so you're going to be able to take advantage of that. And they compared it to Ultra settings in the base game. So if you were thinking about Ultra in 2015, that's kind of what it's going to look like here on Series X after the next-gen update in the quality settings. I always thought that The Witcher 3 was a really sharp-looking game anyway. The first time I played it, hold your breath here, the first time I played it was on the PlayStation 4, so I know that wasn't awful, but I know there's a lot of PC chest puffing going on when they hear that, like, oh, you didn't even experience mods? Actually, no. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in this video on how modding has impacted some of the gameplay changes that they've made here, but I wanted to go over kind of the boring stuff, if you will, first with the visual changes. But yeah, I played on PS4. I thought the game looked great then, so to know it's going to look even better than that, I'm excited. Because I've seen the PC footage, and that game looks legit, so I'm very keen on what they're doing here. Now, on the Series S side of things, one thing they did emphasize is that there will be 60 frames per second on that. I think that's good that they emphasized it because the Series S support has been spotty out of the last couple of games that we've seen from recent releases. And then also CD Projekt Red wasn't really pushing the Series S to its limits when it came to Cyberpunk. They did fix that later on in this year, but at first it was underwhelming to say the least. So they made sure to emphasize the Series S will be able to have a 30 and 60 FPS option on quality and performance mode. Continuing on though, they talked about the PlayStation 5 and how controllers will now have haptic feedback. This is something I wish Xbox got into because I think the DualSense is awesome in that regard. I think it can elevate some experiences. I think of Ghostwire Tokyo where you're kind of pulling the string and you can really feel it through the controller. Like some experiences are elevated and others are more subtle, especially when it's a third-person action game. It's not going to fully immerse you, but you can feel the combat a little bit more. I like that PlayStation 5 went in on this DualSense. It's definitely their best controller yet, probably since, like, I would say, you know, if we're talking innovation, when you look at the leap from PS1 to PS2, like that's what I'm thinking. Like the PS2 is truly like one of their best. Obviously the PS4 controller was a good step forward, but it was still a little too skinny for me, but PS5 is right on the money. So I'm glad that they're supporting that as well. They also added photo mode. I don't know how many of y'all care about that. I don't remember the last time I used a photo mode. I'm very natural, if you will. So I'll hit the share button. I'll hit the screenshot button. I like to just capture the game as it looks instead of, I guess, posing it in a way that you're probably never actually going to see the game looking like with all the filters and things you could put on there. Photo mode is coming to the game. It does look good. I know a lot of people love to mess with that and love to share their screenshots, so you'll be able to do that now in The Witcher 3. Let's get into a couple of gameplay changes here. First and foremost, new camera modes. So you'll go into the options under gameplay, and it's there they show that you can change both the combat camera and the horseback. So they showed the combat one. I noticed it was a bit more close up. I didn't like that, but they showed a closer camera for the horseback, and I liked that. That was a little more intimate. That felt proper for the game when you're kind of trotting along. But that is one thing that they have included here, are new camera modes. But perhaps what I think is more important to you all is the quick casting feature. This is something that I think will excite you. So in The Witcher, prior to this next gen update, what you typically see is you're in combat, you're taking your time, and then you open this radio menu and time slows down as you pick what sign you want to use. However, in this game now, they're adding quick casting, so you'll hold the right trigger and your face buttons will actually change. And when they change, they'll be assigned to each of the signs that you would typically cast from the radio menu. So now combat has a sense of fluidity that it definitely didn't have before. The Witcher's combat always demanded a bit of preparation. You know, what potions do I need? What blades do I want to use? Let me study up on the monster. And that was cool. It was nice to have a more methodical approach to combat in such a ambitious open world game with such popularity. For me, at times, it did feel like a bit of a slog. It did feel a little janky and not the best way at times, but I love that they're adding this feature in because I think it will remove that middleman that broke me out of the combat. I know menus are a part of video games, and at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to go, bro, it's a video game. But I like when you can remove as many menus as possible to, especially when you're an action game. When you're a turn-based game, it's a bit different, but when you're an action game, I want to see as little menus as possible. And especially when there's one popping up in the middle of the screen constantly, even if your combat's great, it's distracting. So I like that they've decided to add this. Just like all of these features I'm going to be talking about, though, they've made it clear that if you prefer it the way with the radio menu and you don't want that fluidity, you want time to think and then react, you can do that as well. This is all changes and switches in the option menu, and I don't think they're changing any of the presets, so it's going to come as the base game, and then you're going to be able to change them as you so desire through the options menu. Continuing on beyond the quick cast, the next thing we learned about was map filters. So the goal here, apparently, according to the development team, was to make the game feel A, less checklisty, and B, less overwhelming. Let's be honest, The Witcher 3 I think is a fantastic game, but when you open that map, you're like, oh God, I don't know how I'm going to tackle all of that. It's a lot of content, and so they've added filters that are also in Cyberpunk now to let you sort through the map and maybe not feel like you got to complete everything. Again, like all of these new additions, it's optional. You can leave the filters off and just see everything for what it is, but if you need to declutter your map and look for a specific objective or just get rid of the mess entirely, the filter is there for you. Furthermore, they got into some of the actual visuals of the game in the terms of like what they were updating on textures. such as the foliage, the grass, the actual character models. Everything's been updated, but they talked a lot about bug improvements. So they stomped out a lot of quest bugs. Specifically, they targeted 2 quests that I was not aware was a really big deal here in CD Projekt Red's community. But the 2 quests that are getting fixed are from Ophir's Distant Shore and the Wolf Armor Hunt. So apparently these quests broke a lot, and this fix is actually going to work retroactively. So let's say you have a current save file, you load in, the actual patch will now work and fix that retroactively, so you can go complete these 2 quests that were notoriously buggy. They said that those were the 2 most popular ones, and that according to the CD Projekt Red community, there were other quest fixes that needed to be done, and they handled those as well. So it's a much more polished product at the top, which is nice to see. They also got a bit into the streaming of data. So what this means for the player is, for example, you would see a smokestack in the distance that previously you wouldn't have, or the detail in Novigrad is a little bit better, where they describe some of the tiles being more 3D, which again adds a sense of fidelity to the game. It looks better, it's a little more immersive, and again, that streaming of data is more important for, I think, seeing things in the distance. More of an intangible, but still something that's pretty cool for the player. This one's a small one, but a good one. They said that you can now pause cutscenes in the game. Love to hear it. Whether you got a pee break or mommy's calling you, off you go. You can pause the cutscenes. They said there was a reason why within the engine they previously weren't able to do that. They said they didn't see a lot of people complaining about it, but they thought it was a good quality of life enhancement, so they added it in. I think this is great. Another thing they did was added additional localization to the actual game. So they've added the Chinese language, and they've added Chinese localization. Like, it's fully voiced in Chinese, which I thought was actually pretty cool, because that type of stuff is not cheap. Like, voice work will take up a big chunk of your budget. So they had a decent amount of money to throw at this for it to be given away for free, which I thought was actually really neat. But speaking of money being thrown at the game, they also made new stuff. New quest. There's going to be a new DLC quest based off the Netflix series. They're taking armor and weapons from season 1 and 2, and they are adding them into the game on top of this quest line that they only showed the very beginning of because they didn't want to spoil it for people. And I imagine they're also not adding a ton of brand new content, but this is something that they are bringing in. It seems like there is going to be more, though, because based off what they said multiple times throughout this entire presentation, they've stated, like, oh, there's more surprises. Like, when we had the patch notes, there are going to be things we don't mention that we want you to find for yourself. And I think it's because they seem to have a pretty good grasp on that team of viral marketing and how it works. And sharing the little discoveries that players will dig up and find is definitely something that will work in their favor. It has in the past with Cyberpunk, where I take, for example, this is a really messed up one, but when people were jumping off buildings in Cyberpunk, you were just walking along the street and someone would land in front of you. Folks were like, wow, they just added this. They didn't talk about it, but they certainly added it. That's really messed up and depicts how dark Night City is. And especially after Edge Runners, it makes a lot of sense how messed up it is. But that was something people were discovering and sharing, and it was putting more attention to the game because folks were going, wow, there's so much detail here. Like, what else did they pack into this? And so you look a little deeper. And so I imagine they're going to have those types of things tucked away. But that's the main new piece of content they talked about, was this Netflix-inspired quest line with the Netflix-inspired equipment. And they even brought back the voice actors for this quest line. It's not just Geralt, though, who they're giving all the new bells and whistles to. Dandelion also has a new outfit inspired by his look within the Netflix series, which I thought was also really nice to see. Otherwise, there's going to be new Nilfgaard armor, and then they talked a bit about cross progression. So let's say I'm playing on my Switch, I upload my save to the cloud, I can play it on my PlayStation, or I can play it on my Xbox, what have you, and you can continue just as you would with Cyberpunk. So absolutely awesome to see. I hope CD Projekt Red keeps that a thing in future games, because I think it's much appreciated. But that's everything you really need to know about the next gen update that they covered in their 30-minute presentation. All in all, I'm excited. We're definitely going to cover it on the channel. We're going to do a So I Tried Playing video on it. We'll probably do a breakdown of it once it's all out there, just to talk about it a little bit more. But really pumped to see what CD Projekt Red is bringing to the table. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, take excellent care of yourselves. I can't wait to see your thoughts on this in the comments down below. Do fire away. Other than that, be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.